Welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable podcast. You just heard from my friend Steve-O.
I know, I said that.
Yeah, it is Saturday, May 9th, 3:27 p.m. I am here with Ariel, Distan Faye, Jeremy, Sheridan, Steve-O, and Zopa, and we are going to have an informal discussion on the case to be made for the necessity of Biden or lack thereof. We are going to figure out whether it is vital, or we're going to talk about at least, whether it's vital that every American vote for Joe Biden, mostly to avoid Donald Trump, or whether it's more important that we take control of the Democratic Party and make sure they don't occupy the progressive lane without being progressives by making Joe Biden lose and enduring Donald Trump. I mean, let's figure out if we like the rock or if we like the hard place. So without further ado, Steve-O, thank you. Read the premise of our program today.
I don't feel like... All right, fine. Premise. A panel of two persons who plan on backing Biden this November make a good faith case for why they believe doing so is the best choice for America, and answer a series of questions on poverty, basic income, and electoral politics in regard to the Biden topic provided by our regular speakers. Thank you.
Perfect. So,
feel free to make my voice sound funnier in post.
So Steve-O and Zopa are our likely Biden supporters. Everyone else, except for me, is a speaker with questions for them, and I'm going to moderate. Let's begin with you, Ariel.
Oh.
Sorry.
Let's begin with the ceremonial pen drop. Nice.
It's
And
like the
now
opening
we're
bell
off.
for Wall Street.
Ding, 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 baby.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go for it.
So the question, repeat it, and talk a little bit after it.
Ask your first prepared question to our panelists.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we don't even get to
So-
introduce ourselves?
Oh shit! I did skip the opening comments, didn't I?
Like
Is
5
that why you
minutes-
were? Is that why you're confused?
Right.
Okay,
And-
cool, good. You do have a question. That was my okay. Good, everybody. Okay, guys. Zopa, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So yeah, my name's Ben or Zopa, whatever you want to go with.
Cool.
I live in New York, and anybody who's watching on video can see where my primary sympathies were on the back wall there. I did a lot of work for Elizabeth Warren, and so I fought really hard to not have the Joe Biden future that we're currently living in.
We had a lot of fights about it. I mean,
Yeah, we did. What I hope people listening understand is that for me, whether you agree or not, that meant radical change. Like that to me was, you might think that that's the wrong path, but I wasn't in it for like some moderate nibble around the edges thing. I was here to make real change, and that felt like the way to do it. And I, with a group of people here in Brooklyn, we went to Iowa for a week. We were in New Hampshire 3 times. We were in South Carolina. Like, we spent a lot of time, like, talking to people and being like, please, let's do something serious and something real. And we lost. But, like, when you're doing that work, the first thing you do is to convince people that you're both on the same side. That you both want the same thing for the country, and we're just talking about how to get there. And and some people can BS their way through that. I can only do that if I mean it, like if it's real. And what I heard so many times were people who were just afraid. They didn't like the way the country was going, and they wanted just kind of a least common denominator to get rid of the terrifying thing they felt happening to our democracy. And, I think their political theory was incorrect. And I would have wanted things to go a different way. But like participating in that process means to me being an ally in good faith. And that means like I take my best shot. I try to persuade people. But if I lose, like no positive change is possible without the ordinary moderate voters in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in all over the country who I talk to. Like, we're not talking plutocrats. We're not talking like big party donors. We're talking normal people who looked at this thing and said, Biden's the way to go. And so like, if I want them to show up for me one day, I got to be there for them when they need it. And so that's where I think we are.
Thank you, Ben. Would you please introduce yourself as well, Steve-O?
Hi, I'm Steve-O. I do other podcasting, and I've known Shale for many, many years. I'm here because I guess you could just say I'm very much a pragmatist, and very similar to the person who, to Ben, who just talked about, being in the Warren camp and then having to look where else to go. I was initially backing Elizabeth Warren. Back in 2016, I did vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary. I did vote for Hillary Clinton in the general. And Maryland's primary has not happened yet, so I haven't had the opportunity to vote at this point. But I, as very much a pragmatist and an empath, like, I know Star Trek lingo, but I very much empathize, or I try to empathize with literally every situation. I may not be able to put myself in your shoes, but I can look at them and try and imagine what it would be like. I believe that it is far more important right now, because I don't think this country could survive, and at the very least, I don't think it would survive intact another 4 years of a Donald Trump presidency. I also think that there would be far, far too many casualties were the system completely upended entirely. So if you get, it's kind of passe for people to say, burn it to the ground and start all over. They say it almost tongue in cheek. But there are people out there who do take that seriously. And I believe that 4 more years of Trump would have a very similar effect to burning it to the ground and starting all over again. The best path forward, and what I've been trying to convince as many people as possible, and that is, again, one of the reasons why I agreed to come on here, is that we need to put the house out of being on fire before we can focus on putting the pictures back up, before we can straighten out and change the wallpaper and make sure that the floor is intact. You need to make sure there's no more active damage being done before you can start to recoup and fix what the problems are with the system. Because if you're not interested in fixing the system, then you're only interested in bringing the system down. And as I mentioned, the fallout from that would be beyond catastrophic. So I am heavily encouraging anybody, because I know almost for a fact that I probably wouldn't live through another 4 years of this. And I'm about to become a dad in 7 weeks, so that's not really in my best interest.
Do you sincerely believe, without exaggeration, you would not literally live through 4 more years of Trump?
I actually think the stress would kill me.
And how would that manifest?
If for some other reason I'm not killed in some other way.
It's not hyperbole. This is not the place for hyperbole.
No, this is not hyperbole. This is not hyperbole. There is a history of heart failure in my family. And despite the fact that I have done everything I can to keep myself heart healthy and body healthy, I cannot stop the absolute amount of stress that is coming into my life due entirely to the situation of the world through which I have very little direct control.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. All right. That's a good introduction, Steve. Thanks for being here. I know it can be uncomfortable coming into a place where people have a different opinion, and you are in the minority. So I'm hoping to make you both comfortable and happy with your experience. And I think we're ready to move on. Everybody, any objections? Everybody?
Should we all introduce ourselves, everyone else first?
That's
as well?
what we should do. Yes.
That would be great for me.
Starting with you, Ariel.
Yeah, so I'm Ariel, and what can I say? At the first time, I thought Trump was a good idea, because I thought, like, well, I don't know, nothing can be worse than, what we already have. I just thought, like, maybe I can get, like, he's an economy jobs guy, so, hopefully I'll have a better job out of it with better pay. But he didn't fulfill that promise. He sucks. Just gonna say it. And then when Yang was running, I was like, okay, well, I thought, like, people like Obama and Trump were, like, all rhetoric, but Yang actually had a plan. So I was super activated by it, and I just thought that the guy was awesome. So I, like, converted my whole entire channel to, like, just talking about Andrew Yang. And I really feel that he's been unfairly treated, like, the whole entire way through. But a little thing that does give me hope is that he said he was having talks with Biden So if Biden does make it, like if he gives something to Yang and that something can lead to like a policy for the country, I'm hoping UBI, I will be open to that.
Thank you, Ariel. That was good. Distan.
Hey, I'm Dizdon. You might know me from many streams and stuff, but today, as far as politically going, I was in favor of something similar to UBI as far back as 2009. My friend Steve, not Steve-O, different Steve, and I have been very pro UBI since even before the debacle of the 2016 Hillary Trump. Because we both come from very rural Minnesota. Our families are both, very low wage, blue collar. You work one or two full time jobs to make ends meet because reasons. And it felt to me that Yang was the person who had the policies and the ideas to get that sort of actual change and possible, fixing to the lower middle class and the lower class that is direly missing from all other politicians. And I'm not just talking about the Republicans, I'm talking about the Democrats, because from my home area in Minnesota, we've had a Democrat in name only by the name of Colin Peterson since 1992 that has done this much zero fucking good for my family, although he keeps getting reelected because he's a Democrat. So it's like, I actually felt better when we had Jesse Ventura as governor than we do right now, and that's sad because I was like 10 years old.
Jesse Ventura is a pretty cool guy, though, to be honest.
He used to be a wrestler. That's pretty cool. All right, thank you, Distan. Fei Ku.
Hi. So I might be also taking a pro Biden approach right here, because even though I've been yanking all year, probably when I took that poll that came out from, like New York Times or something like that, Washington Post, where you put in your preferences. Zephyr, you guys need to go outside to play. So when I took that poll, it came out the same way it did back in 2016, that I'm ideologically closer to probably Sanders. That I was like something like 92% match if you just say, oh, do you agree with this? Do you want this? Do you want that? When they match me up by algorithm, that's how I match. And then, but actually back in 2016, the only person I was really excited about was Elizabeth Warren. And I jumped in on the Elizabeth Warren for president 2016. And of course, she just refused to run because, Hillary was going to go again. So when Yang came along, I was like, wow, somebody who actually, has all the policies that I really believe in. And the things that I disagreed with, he had a way of explaining things. This is how it works, and this is why we need to do it. That I don't think people can say, you change your mind very often. Like you can literally see yourself changing your mind as he speaks. You're like, oh, okay, well, I guess it does work better that way. And so that was really exciting for me. I'm like, here's somebody who really can, not only seems like he's already on my side, but he also is changing my mind. And so he moves people closer to his position wherever you come from. And so now we're talking about a situation where we've got Biden going, and Yang has basically endorsed him because before he even started, Yang decided this was the party for him. And I mean, if you're going to be the party team player, now's the time to continue being the party team player. You don't start something and then halfway through your commitment you say, I'm not gonna finish that. And so I feel that a lot of the candidates were actually awesome candidates. I liked many of them. I was never really angry at most of them, even when things would happen, like when Buttigieg copied something, we would say, oh, why is he doing this hacking points? I wasn't really angry about that. I just, Andrew Yang said, yes, it's great when people copy you. That's one more person out there talking your policy. It's not about taking the credit, which is very opposite of politicians. And so now with with what okay, you guys may not know that I'm actually going to the Texas convention for the Democratic Party as a delegate for the state convention as Sanders. Okay, and then now I'm trying to run for that same kind of delegate position, national delegate for the national convention as a Biden supporter. And say, well, how can you run for two different things after you've been yanking all year? Well, because the reason is I want to see everything that happens in this political process. And honestly, all of the candidates are really good in their own way. And so Biden's strength is he has that support. You know, if he has that support and he's he's the one that's going to win, I have to support him right now. And that means that there are real people behind him. It's not, just one person. There's a lot of people who've worked for Biden in the past. There have been people who worked for him, became vice president. And so there's a lot of real people behind him. With them, I'm for the unity ticket right now. And if this allows me to go and see what happens at each stage, I can bring that information back to young people. And I know a lot of Yang Gang, a lot of Sanders supporters, younger people. But we need to create that pipeline to leadership right now. And so in order to do that, we can't stand outside and keep saying like we're not going to be ever the party. We're just going to be outside-sizing it. I feel like I need to find out everything that's going to happen, everything that needs to happen in order to make real change politically. And so I really appreciate you guys coming here to talk to us. And it's great that you're doing.
Before we move on, could you just clarify what the unity ticket is for everybody?
Well, there's kind of a sense of the big tent. Now, everybody came in here for the primary, with our own positions, and we have very different positions. We have different opinions about some of the different candidates, but at this point, we are in a different phase, right, of the political process. This phase of the political process is still pretty important. So I think it's important to try to move on to that phase, and they're calling it the big tent, where everybody comes back in and tries to do something moving forward together.
Thank you, Faye. Let us move on to Jeremy. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. Hi, this is
Yeah,
Jeremy.
it's just like you're the first person I got to without a camera. So I didn't mean to be weird about it. I'm just like, should I look for him? Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Jeremy. I'm coming from St. Louis, Missouri. I guess if I was going to just, try to describe how I approach this ideologically, I think when it comes down to the choice between Trump and Biden, it's not a choice of the lesser of two evils. I really equate them to be the same evil with a different color backdrop. There is really nothing on the Biden platform that I can get on board with, and there's also nothing on the Trump platform that I can get on board with either. So at the end of the day, when it comes time to vote in November, I will be either voting third party or just writing in a protest vote. And
Thank you, Jeremy.
So yeah, later on in the discussion, I'll get into why I feel that Trump and Biden are both equal pieces of shit.
Sounds good. I love the verbiage. Let's move on to you, Sheridan.
But not the nounage, I hope.
Oh, touche, Faye.
Nice. Hello, yeah, Sheridan. I'm coming from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was politically homeless essentially in 2016. I voted for Gary Johnson because I agreed with his platform the most and disliked the ignorance of both Hillary and Trump platforms. And Yang was the only platform I've ever really felt like at home with. It answered every problem I had. And it was detailed and it was very expansive. Going now after his suspension, I'm probably going to be voting third party in an effort to help get either the Green or Libertarian Party to 5%. That is definitely because my state is very, very blue electorally and has no laws about the public vote corresponding to the electoral college.
Thank you, Sheridan. So, Steve-O and Zopa, you have pretty much already introduced yourselves, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So we'll move on to Diston. Oh, wait, Diston, did you already? Did we get
I think
everybody?
we did it.
Yeah, Dizdon.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I think
Great. All right.
everybody's been introduced.
So, would you please read now the format, Steve?
Sure, let me go back to it. The format. Panelists will each have 5 minutes for opening comments. I believe we've already done that, followed by a structured Q&A session in which our regular speakers will take turns asking our panelists a series of prepared questions. Panelists will have 3 minutes to respond to each question, and speakers who wish to comment on those responses will be given 30 seconds to do so after our panelists have finished. In the interest of equitably dividing our time and attention amongst many worthy topics and individuals, no single topic may be responded to more than 4 times, and no speaker may respond more than 5 times in aggregate during this course of this moderated discussion. There will be an open discussion immediately following this moderated one. Please take notes so you're able to bring up anything during the open discussion you weren't able to address during the moderated segment of the program, and I've already been doing that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. You are an asset to the show already.
You said ass.
I fucking did, man. So, let's start then with. Let's start then with you, Ariel. Let's go back to. I think we are ready to begin the format proper. So, Ariel, please ask your question.
Okay, so do any of you guys think that Joe Biden would be open to a universal basic income idea?
Which one of us should
sorry.
do it?
I remember what I just wanted to say before you ask your question. Jeremy, I just want to task you with looking at the chat for ours because I'm looking at everyone's cameras, okay? Because I'm. Can you look at the chat for people who want to reply? And okay, great. Just let them know if there are replies. Thanks. All right. I'm so sorry for interrupting you, Ariel. Please continue.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to ask if you guys think that Joe Biden would be open to a universal basic income idea.
I can feel this. I do feel that this is partially part of my aggregate response to people who are very tepid or outright antagonistic against Biden. I don't know if Biden himself may or may not be open to the idea, but what might be more important would be whom he would pick to be in charge of health and human services or in charge of Social Security. For example, if he ended up picking Bernie Sanders, who, as I believe was mentioned before, has everybody who has dropped out of the Democratic primary has been talking with and coordinating with and trying to make productive discussions with Joe Biden. So you put Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Andrew Yang in charge of the agencies or divisions that deal with things similar to universal basic income, like Social Security, disability insurance income, stuff like that, Medicare, Medicaid. I do believe that we would go in that direction.
Okay. So, like, Andrew Yang could be part of his cabinet?
I believe, honestly, that this time around, as mentioned before, the whole idea of the unity ticket, the big tent bringing people back, seeing how many different ideas there are, and a lot of these ideas can very healthily coexist within the same platform ticket, that it's less important about Joe Biden as a president, and more important, as has been evidenced of the last 3.5 years, that while the president might be the big mouth, the emblem, the big visual that people have, it's the picks that the president gets for the individual agency heads, the Supreme Court justice picks. Those are indefinitely more important. So I do believe that, yes, I think that Andrew Yang could honestly have a place in Joe Biden's cabinet.
Okay. I mean, I'd be down for that.
I think most of us would be for that if that was what was going on. The thing that I have the most problem with right now is just that everything that's been happening is so behind closed doors, whereas with the primaries, a lot of the candidates were a little bit more open with why they were making changes to their policies and what their policies were, and they were a lot more transparent. And this is really making a lot of us afraid that even though we're thinking that yes, this would probably actually be in Biden's best interest, the DNC's best interest, we are still very afraid of what happened in 2016 with Hillary and her entire, picks being very, very, very neoliberal, not very progressive, and threw a lot of us towards the not voting or third party vote.
Ben, do you want to field this, or you want me to continue?
No, I can go. Yeah, I mean, I think Steve made a great point about the team and it, and I do think
you cut out a key point there about the what?
The team mattering a lot, like who you appoint to what positions. And the unfortunate thing about our system is that you really don't get that until somebody is like already won the election, right? Like that's a transition team thing that happens over time. But I think it's like to me, in terms of like what, like I've seen Biden trying to have a Big Ten, like making serious outreach to Warren, making serious outreach to Sanders. Like a Warren example is he adopted her bankruptcy plan, which is striking because that was Warren's first moment in politics, was fighting with Joe Biden over bankruptcy. And he's now saying he was wrong on that, and he wants to reform it the way she wants to reform it. I look at Biden and I think of him as somebody who is going to go where the majority of the party goes.
And not so standard thing would be he's like silly putty.
Yeah, I mean, he would say it as like he's a coalition builder, right? But like he's less an ideological figure than somebody who wants to be the leader of the party, whatever that means to the party. He has his own convictions too, but broadly speaking. And so it's less about what he will do or what he wants to do, and more about like what we can push him to do. But we only get that chance if we're if we're on the same team and trying to say where we go, right? So like we're here for like broadly positive change. We agree on a lot of things, but like we think this policy would be better or this person would be better. To me, with UBI, just to add something to the first question too, like to me, like the core of that is more money for more people with less bullshit. And so like if you're asking for like, I don't necessarily think we're going to get $1,000 a month for everyone in the next 2 years, right? Like, but there's a lot of places where you can do less means testing, like roll back work requirements, expand the amount of money and support that we give to people, broaden the pool of people that goes to. And that's something that there really is broad agreement in the Democratic Party around.
I do have 2 quick points to bring up. First of all, things like disability insurance and social assistance things, the amount of broadening that has is nearly limitless, just based on the premise of the laws. So while you may not get a guaranteed UBI, you could open the range of disability insurance benefits to people who have such mundane things as depression or ADD. That's not out of the realm of possibility, and that is by far one of the biggest open stepping stones that you can make towards making UBI an acceptable thing.
So I actually have a quick question about this. Because we are seeing the current crisis expand unemployment offices so much, there's an overall problem that I definitely see and complain about is the costs of indirect administration. Basically hiring someone spending money on administration to allow them to decide who is deserving to live in prosperity and who is not deserving. That inherently seems like a point of failure with our entire welfare state that a UBI would easily eliminate. Except,
gonna-
of course,
Sorry.
healthcare. I do understand that that should be directly government funded.
Just to step in on that, I understand the pragmatism of that and the fact that obviously algorithms are not a good way of evaluating individual cases when it comes to things like, do you deserve unemployment? Additionally, the overhead administrative costs for things like interviews for unemployment benefits, interviews for disability insurance, that also goes up. But the inherent problem is not that UBI is not the overall solution. The issue therein is that you also need to clear out the corruption and biases as much as possible within the current infrastructure in order to make that more palatable. Because you're not talking about something that literally everybody can agree with right now. Like, I'm sure that within these cloisters, and some of the cloisters are very large, within these cloisters of people who are similarly affected or disaffected, is that UBI is a good idea. And I absolutely agree. I was actually discussing this on the side with Dizdon at some point, that I'm not saying that UBI is a bad idea. I absolutely think that UBI is a good idea. It's that you cannot it's more like a pole vault than it is a 100-yard dash where there's a clear thing ahead. You have obstacles to overcome. And unfortunately, a good chunk of those obstacles is the current infrastructure. So you clear up the corruption within that infrastructure. And that's something that I was particularly impressed with, both with Sanders as well as with Warren's anti-corruption platforms, that you clear that up. Not only are you giving more people eligible jobs for working, like for a lot of people who are potentially unemployed right now, being able to sit there and use, for example, like a psychology degree to evaluate people whether or not, by more lenient standards, they qualify for unemployment benefits. You're giving them a job, and you're also allowing more people to thusly get money in lieu of a job within those relaxed restrictions. Does that make sense?
I do completely understand that, though I think a federally coordinated jobs board would be a more efficient use of resources combined with a UBI, and we could sidestep a lot of these job-related welfare programs.
Well, I mean, we can argue efficiency, and again, that's the whole matter of jumping those obstacles. Efficiency cannot be used in every situation to supplant the logical means to go and bring everybody else along with the infrastructure along the way. But I like your idea.
I believe Dizdon had a comment on this as well.
The way that you brought up the Bernie and Warren anti-corruption policies, but you completely overlooked anything that was in Yang's plan. I just wanted to ask, in particular, the one plan that would basically preclude anyone from being a lobbyist after having left a government position like Congress, Senate, or lobbyists who were trying to become a senator or congressional representative. Did you think that those policies that Yang had would also be a good idea to possibly add to the Bernie Warren policies that might be best enacted with Biden as a coalition, so that way we can root out said corruption?
If I remember, go ahead.
Sorry, we can just kind of trade off.
Yeah.
I think that's a good policy. I mean, not to keep fighting the primary, although it's hard to stop sometimes, but I think Warren and Bernie both already supported versions of that. But I don't think you should be able to be in Congress and then turn around and be a lobbyist.
I was going to say the exact same thing, if I remember correctly, and I'll admit, while I am extremely familiar with Warren's policies because she was the person I was backing. I am along a range of familiar, like relatively familiar to not as familiar, and like Marianne Williamson, I really had no idea what her policies were, but
She wasn't in very long anyway, so no one really.
No. I'm just saying that my relative knowledge, it depends. It's a situational thing.
Yeah, I don't think we're meaning to slight Yang by leaving.
Right, exactly. Warren did, I believe, specifically say at some point that if you're a lobbyist for at least a period, I think it was 5 years, it was some period, you could not serve within the representative political positions, and also vice versa. If you were a politician, at least within one respective term of you leaving, you were not allowed to be a lobbyist for anything in Washington. But I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think Yang's was along the same lines, but might have been a little bit more stringent on the, like, I think you had to be not a lobbyist for like 6 or 8 years. But yeah, I mean, combine that with term limits, that'd be very good for rooting out corruption in the lower levels of government.
I mean, basically what you're talking about is a non-federal version of an inverse Hatch Act, which, for those of you that are not familiar, the Hatch Act prevents any federal employees from taking part or encouraging monetary or support donations for partisan political matters, either while they're on job site, on work hours, using government equipment, using a government badge, or using a government vehicle. And depending on whether or not you're more or less restricted, some of those restrictions can further increase. So, similar to that, if you've been working the system as a lobbyist, you shouldn't be allowed to game the system from the inside as soon as you're done. And if you've been working on the system from the inside to improve it, you shouldn't be allowed to try and game it since you know all the loopholes once you're out. I completely am on board with that.
But this is one where we're going to have to, like, this is a long-term thing. Like,
yeah,
the thing about corruption is one policy never fixes it, because there are lots and lots of people who are paid extremely well to find ways around your one policy. So you need
that's the way that we're finding out every day right now. With the how many felonies have we been able to find that our current president is guilty of at this point?
I don't know how high does scientific notation go?
Yes, there are quite a few charges, possibly a few thousand individual charges that can be related to this current administration. But that's only because this administration really opened up the public's view on all this activity because of his incompetence. I like to refer to him as the special needs president, because we've all had to pick up the political slack.
They're shitty criminals in both senses of the word. They're shitty at being criminals, and they're shitty people being criminals.
I mean, they're trying to take my family's policies, like my family in Staten Island, the Catanios policies, because mob ties for Trump. But
and I realize we've got more than freeform, so I apologize for that.
Should we move on to the next question?
I think I was going to say, yeah, this is a great segue to the Ariel's second question.
Well, we'll come back to Ariel. Why don't we move on to Diston? Did you set you right? You're next.
Are we going in order of the questions, or just like hopping between?
We're going down the line from top to bottom in the room here. So Ariel and Diston, then Faye, then Jeremy, Sheridan, and then we'll go back loop.
I know that you've talked a little bit about the coalition stuff, so you might be reiterating that right now. But from what I'm familiar with the voting record before he was the vice president, does Joe Biden actually differentiate himself enough from some of Trump's pro-corporate policies? And in particular, my concern is with regards of the Patriot Act and a lot of the things that he did with the Wall Street bailouts.
Let's see. As far as I might have missed the beginning of that, but I think I got the gist of it. My internet got a little wonky.
It was basically, the question was about voting record and how it differentiates from Trump, as well as trying to explain or absolve some of the other transgressions that Biden's previous job history have put on his shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as like the raw corruption of, I don't know, stuff like trying to get Pentagon contracts directed away from Amazon because he doesn't like the Bezos Washington Post, like, I don't think there's anything in Biden's history that compares to that, right? Like, Trump sees every government expenditure as his personal expenditure, right? So, like, there's a big difference there. There's also a difference in terms of like the one big legislative accomplishment that the Trump administration had was a big tax cut for corporations and the wealthy. And like, that's, you know, I have my issues with some parts of Senator Biden's when he was a senator, like fiscal policies, but like, that's not, you know, a big capital gains cut like that is not where he is looking in the future. So I do think there's real differences there, and it's like philosophically maybe and I'm not a Biden surrogate, so I can't necessarily give the strongest case of the case for Biden, but there's a like pro capitalist position, right, which we could all argue with. And then there's a like crony capitalist position, right? Like the fascist, if you want to take it in the sense of like the state and big business powers like working together as close as possible. And I don't like the plain old capitalist position, but
I don't think most of us here do.
Right, but I really, really don't like the like union of state and, you know, of like CEOs and government, right? Where you're using business power to buttress your political wins, and then you're using the purchasing power and all other powers of government to buttress particular businesses, and that relationship goes on forever.
That's definitely how Venezuela fell.
Do you have anything to add to that, Steve?
I actually have two quick points to add to that. First of all, you can always make progressive comparisons between the two. There has been, as far as I'm aware, with Tara Reid, one potentially on the books sexual assault allegation against Biden, whereas for Donald J. Trump, there have been 24. Whereas
he's not as prolific as Bill Clinton.
No, I'm just saying, and on that same token, like, let's look at the nepotism in Trump's current cabinet. You can count on your hands and your toes, and probably then some, the amount of people either directly related to his family or related to his business interests or have donated to his campaigns that have become a part of the government infrastructure at the executive level, all the way at the top. Whereas for Biden, as far as I'm aware, he just tried to help out his kid with getting settled in business. He wasn't abusing the power of his office in order to do that. He was just trying to be from my understanding, just trying to be a responsible dad. So
well, he wasn't even vice president at the time, so that doesn't even
right, but he was still in politics at the time. That's what I'm saying. Like, he was still politically active. So you can make these comparisons, and you will always find that the current corrupt administration is going to be exponentially worse. And my second point would be, I've always known within both, basically you're talking anywhere left, the Democratic Party, parts of the Green Party, anything else that's farther left than that, is that we have been known as people who recognize that others can make mistakes. There have been parts of almost everybody's personal history, whether it's something that they voted on the record while they were in Congress, or something that they did as a stupid kid when they were in high school, that they regret, that was captured in the public, and that can be brought out again. That people do change, and people can change, and especially now, with the idea of the Big Tent and the fact that you've already seen Biden's positions go progressively more to the left throughout the entire course of the Democratic primary in 2020, that it's going to be much easier to win a fight with Biden on any issue than it would be to try to convince Trump and his entire support group that anything that we have to say is worth merit because we are, quote, the losers.
What you were saying about the mistakes thing, and that is kind of what I was trying to get to, was like, how much did you and Ben think he was going to continue going towards the progressive side, considering, you know, the way that this primary went and the COVID crisis and where we're currently leading to 4 months away from November? That's what I was trying to get at. And
Ben, since I ramble, I'm going to let you lead off.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, in terms of where we are right now, I see it as like we need to be like throwing serious resources at this economy like for the next 2 years. Like just spending as much as we can, or we're going to have a worse rerun of what we all lived through from 2008 on. And that, like, I do believe that like some of the people in the like wider Obama Biden circuit kind of learned the lesson of what happens if you go small on this stuff. And I think there's more resolution in the Democratic Party to go big. Whereas like the fact that we want states across the country to be firing like teachers and firefighters and whatever now, like if you listen to Mitch McConnell, like, you know, holding hostage aid for states is just a terrible thing. So at this point in time, so like, I do think a Biden administration is going to try to go as big as possible at like getting money out the door. And that might look like, you know, like UBI-ish type stuff, short-term UBI-ish type stuff. It might also look like spending on infrastructure projects, all sorts of stuff like that. But like, that's what's going to need to happen, and it's going to need to happen for a while.
Well, I'm glad that you're admitting that it's going to be at least 2 years, because it might
It
be
is.
more. It might be more.
That's the optimistic version, right? Because like we can't even start recovering from this for another, I don't know, 6 months, 18 months, like when we have a vaccine.
Yep. Well, yeah, exactly.
It would take a lot.
And
Really
that definitely helps me feel a little bit less opposed to
I would say apprehensive, but let me also jump in here. As Ben, you were mentioning earlier that there are people who get paid a lot of money to find loopholes around like singular laws and find the best way through to manipulating the results that they want through the government levels. Is that you better believe there are people within the Democratic Party and within the DNC as well that are taking notes at the disparate elements that show up on Twitter, on Reddit, on Facebook, everywhere that these small groups have a big voice, and that they know there is a very large contingent of people that are swallowing their pride and their tongues and saying, I will vote for Biden, but as soon as that's done, as soon as Biden is president, the Democratic Party will have to earn me back. Like, they're going to immediately unregister as Democratic affiliates, like their party card is going to change. They know this, and that they're going to do everything that they possibly can without alienating the large part of the moderates that they still need to court, because a lot of the people who are very vocal online, it's not the largest percentage of people who end up voting. So
Sharon,
I do believe it's still going in that direction.
People who vote are far older, and well, we'll see where they're at in 4 years.
Yeah, the digital divide is a horrible canyon to cross in the first place.
Yeah, before we get too much further, Sheridan, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, there was a comment about how Biden is becoming more and more progressive throughout the primary. And I kind of want to remind that Trump was incredibly progressive in his primary, even stating like crazy things that presumed we would get Medicare for all or some form of it. But that never happened. His basic promises never happened. So how are you so confident that Biden will be able and capable to organize and get these things across the line?
There's sorry, I'll jump in first. This one.
Go for it.
One really big difference is Trump would say those things, and they would be like off the cuff references like in a speech or in a debate or something. If you went and tried to find a plan for how he was going to do it, it was never, ever, ever there. And that's something actually that makes like podcasts and groups like this really, really important, because for one person, like you hear a politician say something and you're busy, you don't have time, you can't dig into it. But like if we've got a whole group of people together, we can crowdsource and do the research and be like, oh, well, he says he's for universal this or universal that, but there's nothing saying how that's going to happen. Like and vice versa, you can notice that there's like when there's real specifics behind it. Like if you've laid out specifically what you're going to do, it's much, much easier to come back later and be like, why isn't step 1 and step 2 and step 3 and step 4 happening? What's the reason? And Biden's been a lot more specific about the proposals he's laid out than Trump was on his progressive proposal.
Yeah, I was about to basically chime in and say Trump has and always will be a blowhard and saying whatever the hell he wants to boost his ego and chances of looking good in the eyes of other people and blaming everyone else for his mistakes. So if you were to go to Trump and ask him why his progressive policies didn't happen, he will probably blame Pelosi and Schumer day and night, even though he did fuck all to even propose any of that shit once he got elected.
Barack Obama kept him from doing it.
Yeah. Let me offer a quick caveat. No, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say, so in the summation, Trump's a liar. Biden's not that much of a liar, and he has some details in his policy.
I
was
can
wondering.
address this.
Please do, because I was wondering
sure.
what else gives you confidence.
Well, let me offer a caveat to my whole spiel about how we believe that people can change, that when they say that they're changing, that their professed intentions are true. Donald Trump has over 70, almost 80 years of history of being a pathological liar, a terrible businessman, a racist, bigot, sexist abuser who habitually says bullshit in order to get ahead and has run numerous businesses into the ground. Now, I'm not saying that he will never be able to change. However, based on that history, there's a little bit of leniency on the fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. There's a lot less history evident of Biden either lying or being manipulative or anything else that has caused Trump and has followed Trump throughout his life and also made his presidency so bad.
So I would disagree with that.
Yes, Biden is not as bad as Trump. You can use that equivalence. I don't know if it would be considered a false equivalence, but based almost entirely on the history of relative consistency and beyond that, just sincerity within politics. Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang and Elizabeth Warren, in my opinion, were the most sincere and fervorous in their opinions and also had plans for them within the primary this year. Trump has never presented anything close to an image resembling like responsibility or competence to that. So that's my
he
input.
just yells about building a wall and making Mexico pay for it.
And insulting the way people who have physical handicaps look when they respond. This person gets my blood boiling. So
right. Well, I
completely agree. Trump is terrible. I am wondering how Biden, who is showing serious aging ailments and gaps in capability that are blatant enough the media can comment on it, how is he going to be capable of getting these progressive policies across the line, as a whole?
That's you, Ben.
With a lot of activism from a lot of people. Like, we need a generally genial person in the White House to sign the bill at the end of the day. Everything before that is like a lot of people demonstrating, calling their congressmen and pushing for stuff. Not being not be like, we don't just vote for Biden and then go home and then trust that he's going to fix everything. We build a movement that keeps fighting for positive change. And that's the only way things are going to happen.
Oh, I'm all for citizen activism, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, we're seeing citizen activism die actively in America. The reason Trump won was because he was perceived as a deal-making, charismatic wonder bag, and we're seeing he's an orange fluff. So how is Biden going to actually get these policies done?
I actually have a response to this.
Go for it.
I do not believe that the reason Trump won was because he was seen as a deal-making, successful businessman. Time and time again throughout history, when you look at the past 50, 60 years of presidential elections, the only reason that Republicans win is because Democrats stay home. That is honestly the reason why, because Republicans have shown that they vote on almost entirely along very specific policies, which are very few and are very, binary. You're either for abortion or you're against abortion. You're either for guns, gun control, or you're against gun control. And the reason why Democrats stayed home in 2016 was entirely due to two reasons. First of all, they honestly believed that enough Democrats would still be fed up enough to go and vote in the polls and stop Donald Trump from winning because, I mean, it's Donald Trump. Who the hell is going to elect him to president? And the second is because of the amount of controversy and tepid to negative reaction of Hillary Clinton in general. So I'm not going to rehash all of the things that went wrong with 2016, but I do not think that at this point it's a productive discussion to be having about whether or not Trump is seen as a charismatic businessman, because his cult of followers would follow him over a cliff like lemmings.
Oh, wait, then you lead into pretty much one of my entire questions about the current crisis. And one of the more important subsects that I don't think Biden has discussed yet publicly, which is Donald Trump's undermining of the postal system and how during November this year, we will likely all need to vote by mail. Has Joe Biden addressed this yet?
I don't know if Biden has, but I do believe that Pelosi and the congressional Democrats have said that that's going to be in the next bill. Support for the post office.
It's the same. I honestly,
and they don't talk to each other, so
yeah, yeah. I've kept my head underwater for the past couple of weeks for the sake of my health and sanity, and also because my wife's had a rough time of it with her pregnancy. So I haven't really paid enough attention recently to know.
It's been insane.
But you're absolutely right that we, like, the post office is one of the few things we have. We should probably keep it alive.
Yeah. My comment would be: do we have a veto trumping majority on this with Republicans? Because Trump has been cited in many newspapers as having said that he will veto anything that saves the post office.
We definitely do not have a veto-proof majority or anything close. We don't even have a majority in the Senate. But then you just have to ask yourself, like, are Republicans in the Senate really going to follow through on that and, like, insist on destroying the post office? And is Trump going to follow through on that threat? And I think he makes an awful lot of empty threats personally. So
I was just
also would say
as a comment on that current discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry?
I was just offering it as a comment to see if you had hope that we'd be able to get it done regardless.
I really do. I do not think that the post office is going to go under. And further to quote Trump himself, he has said that the only way he would not veto something that saves the post office is if it offers the payroll tax cut that would basically de-government Social Security within the next 5 years. So it's either you lose the Postal Service or you lose Social Security. And in both of those cases, the majority of his most fervent supporters, that being isolated rural communities that would depend on voting by mail in order to get their vote in, or the retired geriatric community that votes very consistently. It's been proven time and time again that the older you get, the more consistently you are likely to vote. That those people who haven't died of COVID are going to not be happy to not be receiving their Social Security. So I'm in Ben's boat. I think that those are empty threats because both of those would likely severely detract from the most reliable votes that Trump has had.
Yeah,
if I can jump in on the Social Security thing, I definitely don't think Social Security is any safer with a Joe Biden presidency. I mean, Joe Biden has been trying to cut Social Security for 40 years. All right, so here's a quote from Biden back in 1995 when he was a Delaware senator. He said, "When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security. I meant Medicare. I meant Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. And I meant every single solidarity thing in the government. And I only not tried it once. I tried it twice. I tried it a third time. And I tried it a fourth time." I think, if Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are important to you, you got to remember that Joe Biden will not protect them.
So that is a shitty 90s Democrat thing to say. I don't support it.
That is a very neoliberal thing to say, you mean?
No, it's a shitty 90s Democrat thing.
I mean, call it what you
No,
want.
that's solid.
That's a period of time when like the way to be seen as serious was to be like, oh, all those programs that help people, can't spend money on that. And Biden did a bunch of that. And
So-
I can't defend that past. I think that if a Democrat tried to cut Social Security in this day and age, like on their own, because that was the thing they actually wanted to do, their staff would get up and walk out. Like, we've moved so far. We've moved
so far to the central.
Everybody had plans to cut Social Security, or like candidates for president were like, how are you going to cut Social Security benefits? Now we had candidates running on increasing Social Security benefits. Like, the things have moved a lot. They moved specifically in 2005-06 when Bush got reelected, tried to cut Social Security, to privatize Social Security, and got crushed. Couldn't get it through Congress, and Democrats ran on protecting Social Security and then took back the House. And I think that fundamentally changed the party, and it's just not the 90s anymore.
Do you allow me to clarify? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Which leads to a question I have with Social Security and the payroll tax. Is Joe Biden trying to push for this payroll tax cut to get the Social Security, or to get the Postal Service saved? Because this would be an interesting predicament to see cash stop, but your deliveries be able to go, or to see Trump win and the Postal Service bankrupt, but people do have cash, but nowhere to get their deliveries from.
I think that dichotomy of payroll tax cut for USPS saving, that's a non-starter. And I want to go back and revisit very briefly that the mathematical projections for Social Security to, quote, be running out over time, they're based in actual fact. So something has to be done at some point to either increase the amount of money that's going into the Social Security slush fund, or to decrease the amount of benefits, because just mathematically it's not going to exist. So when somebody says that they're cutting back on Social Security benefits, or they're increasing the payroll tax cut, both of those are means to the same end, and that is basically guaranteeing that Social Security will be indefinitely solvent. But there's no real equivalence, and again, I haven't really seen his policies, and we're here arguing the pragmatism of voting for Biden, not, I guess, based on every single specific issue, but also on the general idea, again, of the big tent, that these specific problems will not be handled by the president himself, because not only have we seen what a lying person would do if they get all this power and try to handle it, but we see in general what it's like for any singular person to handle all of the individual issues with every agency on their own. That's just not how government works. It's always about who's in charge of that agency, who their deputies are. So in regards to saving the Postal Service, I don't think that the payroll tax cut in general is going to be good to save the Postal Service.
Faye, you want to jump in?
Just to take a little bit broader thing of, since we're talking about how these negotiations about more stimulus is going, I think we're seeing a lot of fake fights for a particular reason. During the Obama administration, Republicans specifically refused to vote for any stimulus whatsoever because, in my view, they wanted the economy to be bad because they thought that meant Democrats would lose. Right now, we have a Democratic House with the president who Democrats hate most in all of history. And, you know, dislike your members of Congress as much as you like, but they are voting for serious economic support, large amounts of it, because they think the country needs it, even though passing a $3 trillion stimulus bill makes Trump more likely to get reelected, all things being equal, right? And so that's the context we're in, where like Democrats, for all their weaknesses and flaws, are doing a somewhat responsible thing. And the position that puts Trump and McConnell in is they know that they really need, like, there are things they really need from a Democratic House right now. And so I think what's going on is they're picking a lot of fake fights over things like state aid. They're being like, oh, we can't possibly help states. They should just all declare bankruptcy, or we should just crush the post office. And then we all get fighting about these things, which Republicans don't really oppose anyway, because what they don't want is like a stimulus bill that, I don't know, tries to do something good for the climate. You know, like they don't want to, they're trying to keep Democratic priorities from making their way into the stimulus bill by like picking a bunch of fake fights and then giving in on them. So
I think that's also because they know that the Democrats are infinitesimally more likely to die on specific moral hills.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, before we get too much further, Faye, you had a comment?
Well, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So I'm sad to help Zephyr with some issues that was going on. But I feel that as the single woman here on the panel today, it is my job to make sure that we really cover this topic in depth and not just blow over it. I believe that Trump is a genius in some ways. He's a genius troll, and he has given a nickname to every single person, and his nickname for Joe is Creepy Joe. Right? Creepy Uncle Joe or something like that. And a lot of people have adopted that, and that is the strategy that they're going with. And it's working because a lot of women, are not happy with the fact that he sniffs people. That touches people in a way that looks like people are uncomfortable, and or just stands too close or does certain things like that. And that's been a real issue in trying to get women involved. Okay. And so I'm wondering, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask two men, but you're the panelists we have. So I want to see how you would respond to that. That was, that's the strategy we're going with, apparently.
Well, I really wanted a woman to be our next president. So that's where I'm coming from. I can't defend Biden on this stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of an unfair question because it shouldn't be, you shouldn't be asked to.
That's why I deleted it from my questions.
But
honestly, we cannot have this discussion without just really going into that.
No,
I mean, that's going to be like leaving a big chunk of what's going to happen out.
I think it's important that we talk about it. And, I think there are allegations about Biden that, if true, are disqualified. I think there are equally bad allegations and a lot of them about Trump. I wish this wasn't the world we're in. So I think as far as this stuff goes with Biden, I am glad that there has been reporting about the Tara Reade stuff and investigation into it. I don't think that it is, unfortunately, conclusive one way or the other at this point, which is just a terrible thing about how hard it is to prove sexual assault, especially 30 years later. And that doesn't, and that's not to say it's not credible or anything like that. It's just the only way we're going to know is if more assault allegations come out. As far as the creepy behavior over a period of time, stuff. Not great. Came out during the primary, and unfortunately, a lot of people voted for Biden anyway. So, like,
So,
yeah.
my local Democrats, when I spoke to them, and I want you to know I'm like the youngest person in that group. The meetings take place. I'm like literally the youngest person in my county, and then like maybe third or fourth youngest in the in the big Senate district that I'm in, which is like 19 counties of East
Wow.
Texas. It's a lot of rural counties. So the best response I heard was something like, "Well, he was vetted in 2008." But then in a sense, it's kind of saying, well, then nobody can ever come out for anything. Once you've been vetted once, you're done. So
I mean, I don't. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't find the vetting thing very persuasive because, I mean, they didn't talk to. I guess they didn't talk to Tara Reid, or she said something different. I don't know. She has told different versions of the story at different times, which is both completely understandable and makes this difficult. But no, I mean, like, let me put it this way. If we have a bunch more evidence between now and the convention, I would be totally on board with the convention trying to go in a different direction. And I think he's not the nominee until he's the nominee. But I don't think that, I also have to accept that I don't think that's likely to happen. And like, Trump's going to have more of the nicknames, but like, he met a woman in a department store in New York City, went with her into a dressing room and raped her. Like, this is a very credible allegation about Donald Trump, and there's like 20 more. So, I really wish these weren't our choices in a, like...
Well, we're not talking about, I'm sorry, we're not talking about voters saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden.
Yeah.
We're talking about voters staying home, which is what our other friend here, Steve-O, has talked about, that people can just become inactivated and decide they don't want to vote for anybody and just give up. Like,
I think staying home or voting a third party.
Yeah, I think that's a great reason why, with the time machine, we should not pick Joe Biden. But I don't have a solution to that one, given that he's got so many delegates now.
Well, that's certainly not your job to come up with a solution for him. We're just making that pragmatic case, like you were.
Sure. And I actually have some thoughts to contribute on this. Obviously, as you mentioned, it does put us in a little bit of a precarious position to try and either defend or otherwise encourage people to still vote for Joe Biden, given what's been done. And I won't comment too much, except to say that it's already been known that over time, sexual assault allegations, especially with traumatic memories, they can change. So change stories is totally reasonable. And despite being vetted once, that doesn't mean that repeated vettings are not applicable, especially in this case with somebody who's being represented by somebody who donated to the current president as their legal counsel. What I will say about this is look at the different ways in which the accused have reacted to their allegations. Joe Biden eventually, unfortunately, didn't do it as quickly as I would have hoped, came out and said, I wasn't even there. I wasn't at the place where they said that I was. Somebody else went in my stead. This has already been researched. I am officially requesting that this research come out and any evidence about it within official government records be made public. Even though they didn't do that, officially requesting it, that does say a lot about somebody's confidence in their claim that this person's accusations are fraudulent or false or otherwise exaggerated. Every single sexual assault claim brought against Donald Trump, either Trump refuses to acknowledge it, says things like, oh, she's too ugly, I wouldn't be into her anyway. Or, even goes so far as to say things like, grab him by the pussy. It astounds me that of the over almost 24, if not more, claims against him, and in both of those cases, it doesn't even matter what my objective opinion is. I want any accusations like that to be thoroughly investigated to the fullest extent of the law. I don't care. I don't care who you are, if you have the most clandestine history in the world. Any accusation of that severity deserves, based entirely on personal merit, the most amount of attention and investigation. Now, I can't really absolve his personal behaviors in terms of getting too close, but I will say that as a generational divide, people didn't have nearly as much of knowledge about the personal bubble space that we have right now. It's creepy, it's unsettling. As far as anybody has reported, it's not done with malice. So it's just a very negative habit. It's not done with the expectation of following up and further violating somebody's independence in any way. But that's my 2 cents on the issue.
Just as an aside, I did post a lovely South Park meme picture in the regular chat for you, but for everyone who's basically like, we really wish that we didn't have to make this choice because giant douche tart sandwich.
Very nice.
This is now what 2020, and we had it in 2016 and 2012 and 2008 and 2004 and 2000. 20 years of giant douche versus turd sandwich. When will we learn?
I think most people were fairly happy with Obama when we first elected him. A lot of things happened that later were somewhat disappointing, but we as an American people were pretty excited that we were able to elect him. Maybe not all of us, because I remember that was the first time I watched on TV people praying for the new president to somehow be punished with death. I was like, "You're praying for death?"
Oh,
That's
you
so
mean
crazy.
also the burning of effigies prematurely
Yeah,
as well?
so crazy. But
Yeah,
now,
it's-
we're so further divided even now. I thought that was enough division. But I think part of it is that the older people, like in the rural communities, have gotten further and further divided from the other side because of the way that our media works. And so now the more that you engage with Facebook or YouTube, it's like literally if you watch one Andrew Yang YouTube video this year, right, then you would just keep getting more Andrew Yang suggested to you, and you would never see a single video of one of the other candidates. I was never offered a Warren video unless she paid for an ad, right? And I love Elizabeth Warren. I love to watch stuff about her occasionally. So it was very strange, and I think that I don't think that the older people actually understand how the automation is actually changing our minds. Like they're manipulating us. The robots, automation is manipulating how we think. And so
it's all about search engine optimization.
yeah, so this thing, when we go into the next round, this is one phase now of trying to bring the Democrats together. But then supposing Biden doesn't win and Trump wins because people don't show up, we're again have to go through another round of trying to unify as a country to move forward. And we have been so bad at doing that we have gridlocked Congress so many times. I was literally in Taiwan enjoying my universal health care when I had my youngest son. I birthed him in Taiwan, enjoying universal health care there while people were gridlocked over here about Medicare, the Obamacare they called it. And I was like, why?
You're preaching to the choir right now, because I'm married to a Quebecois who just recently took her citizenship oath here. And with the borders closed, believe me, I understand. It's like, oh man, we could have been up there with her family and everything, but I totally
and like
get
people
that.
who actually make sense.
Yeah, no, and all of my Canadian friends are like, do you need us to like freedom tunnel you to safety at some point? Because
They
like,
did that for the slaves.
yeah, I know, and they're looking at me like that. I'm like,
Oh,
holy
if only they really could, Steve. If only they really could.
No,
regardless.
Wait, they need to annex the north of the United States because the South doesn't want them.
Wouldn't that
Hate
be
to get
amazing
into a
if
rant.
Canada actually flexed like that?
That's okay.
I'm from Minnesota. I'm practically Canadian.
So yeah, so I'm concerned about, what if Biden doesn't win? Because I think part of this is like Biden is saying, we're going to win because we're bringing all these people in. And then, what are we going to do if people just decide to stay home this time? Because COVID-19 too. I mean, so much stuff is going on. They're trying to shut down a lot of primaries. And so people are just getting disengaged because they're not paying attention anymore. They've got too much stress and too much other stuff going on.
Ben, this is you.
I mean, the answer for what we do is always like organize, talk to each other, and keep fighting. But yeah, the world where we have 4 more years of Trump is not a good one. It just like.
But see, the Republicans, I think, there's a lot of Republicans who used to call Trump Republican in name only, or rhinos. They have this whole thing about rhinos who are not real Republicans.
Usually has been less Trump than other people, but yeah, that's a whole Republican thing.
It's also the same with Democrats, like the one that I was talking about earlier, Mr. Peterson. I know Democrat in name only, but the thing is Trump has gone between the two parties, and been registered as both Democrat and Republican on record multiple times over his career, basically depending upon what served him most, because that is who he is and what he is about.
Yeah, I don't think there's like real conservative ideology in Trump. There's real racism, and there's real whatever's good for Donald Trump. And
There's
that's
a lot of flag
there's
hugging.
racism. It's just expediency. It's expedient for him to create division through racism. He doesn't actually feel it. Doesn't care about race. He just cares about winning.
I think it's both, honestly. But
Why would it be both? Where's the evidence for that?
Central Park
Chinese
5,
virus.
one. But we don't need to.
I'm sorry.
Chinese virus.
let me ask,
he's a
guys.
Mexican, even though he was
Well,
actually
that's
an
expedient to
American.
him too. That's also completely expedient. But are we getting too off topic? Are we continuing with the monitor discussion? I want to make sure everyone's getting to everything they want to talk to. How are we doing? Is there anyone with a question on their list of prepared questions they want to make sure we get to before we run out of time? Anybody?
Mine probably would be mine as an intricate one that Sheridan also kind of mirrored. But mine, as recently having moved to Montana with my wife, who is a teacher, it's a very red state. Whoever wins the popular vote in the state wins all the delegates. Trump will win Montana no matter what. What do you tell to me, who doesn't really, if I vote for Biden, I'm throwing away my vote anyway. Why should I vote for Biden over a progressive third-party candidate who might be able to improve progressive chances in 2022 midterm elections and 2024, when it is already given that Trump will win the electoral votes for my state? And because of the Electoral College, popular vote doesn't matter.
What I would say to you, first of all, in Montana, is please, 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 please vote for the Democrat in the Senate race, because that one is in play.
I will be voting for one of the Democrats. I have a different person that I got to vote for the other Senate race, but we'll see if they even make it past the primary.
Yeah.
We have a Republican running in Montana on UBI.
Yes, Dan Larson. I'm going to try and get him onto the full ticket, because if he is against the Democrat in that race, it is likely that the Democrat will take his policies. But I'm more concerned about the presidential election, because I'm already going to be voting for the best options I have.
Did actually see a poll where Biden was up in Montana. Now, that's one poll. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to go. But I think like some of what Faye was saying earlier about how how chaotic this election might be because of COVID, like cuts in all sorts of ways. Like our projection of what will happen in a state because of what happened in 2016 might not be very good. Just like weird stuff could happen this time.
Okay, I should probably also give a little bit more information. Montana already has mail-in ballots for most of the state because of how rural we are. I was mailed my primary ballot yesterday, and I have to fill it out and mail it back. So we're already in that situation where pretty much everyone who can vote will be able to vote, because mail-in ballots are an option when you go and get your driver's license renewed, registered for vote, and that includes the larger cities. So it's definitely something where pretty much as many people as possible are going to be voting. So it might be more closer to 2016 and poll results. And the last one that I looked at about 10 minutes ago said Trump is still highly predicted by all major news organizations and polls to win this year against Biden. So
Yeah,
with
so
that information, continue.
if the premise is my vote will make no difference, then the answer is do what you like, right? But I would just say sometimes if there's any uncertainty, if you're getting towards November and it seems like there's a teeny tiny chance that your state might be one of the ones that pushes us over, then remember that it's a teeny tiny chance. It's a teeny tiny chance of affecting the outcome of the presidency of the United States, and that's a really, really big deal. So you got to kind of multiply those two together. The other thing for me is voting's a collective act. It only makes sense if we all do it together. And so, I'm in New York. It will very likely go blue unless people here are just so impressed with Trump's COVID response, I guess. I don't know. But
considering with how many people are dying there, I don't think so.
Yeah, that was a joke. Yeah, probably I could make that same calculation, right? But it's important for me to vote for the person I think of the two most likely choices would make the better president, because I'm in solidarity with people across the whole country. And me having that intention, me talking to people about it, me just doing it and it coming up in conversation makes a difference and matters and has ripple effects. And so you can't think of politics just in terms of what does my vote do? It's what happens if all of us act this way? And then you act in accordance with that to get content about it.
I actually have something for some of us in the Yang Gang.
Yeah.
We're thinking Trump just has another 4 years to go. But then if it's Biden and he wants to get reelected, how does that open the door? Or can Yang, run against him? That's the only thing that would be good. But I don't know. Some people were saying you just do the 4 years and then you just leave. So I'm still hoping that the 2024 is open.
I think. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just going to mention that just as I said before, that they are. I believe that the people who are tracking not just the polls but the discussions online are intimately aware that a lot of people who will be potentially voting for Biden are the anybody but Trump votes at this point. They want out. They want out of the reality-style reality. It's not something that's enjoyable for a huge amount of people, especially for people who don't typically voice their opinions online or potentially go out to vote. So the moment Biden gets in, as long as he wins, that's an uphill battle for them anyway, and I think they're fully aware of that. I can't, you can't quote me on that, but they would have to be really, really dumb to not recognize that as being a major issue. So they would have to continue to court and continue to press across the spectrum of the Democratic Party as it stands, the various issues, in order for him, if he even wanted it, to have a chance at a second term. But I also think that specifically this time around, the way that the Republicans have been playing it in terms of shutting down even potential competition because of, a Cheeto fragile ego, that in 4 years in 2024, you will see people contesting the incumbent, no matter if the incumbent wants to continue.
Also, just keep in mind, and not to make this a threat type thing, but it is very if Trump wins re-election and the story is people like Yang Gangers and maybe a bunch of Bernie people and people on the left re-elected Trump, and they stayed home, they voted for third parties, they didn't get on board, and that's why we had 4 more years of Trump. Good luck winning a primary from the left in 4 years, because there's going to be real anger there. Because people Like, so many people I talk to just want to beat Trump, and they want the party to come together and us all to like, okay, maybe we're not all getting what we want, but like, let's pick the person who's going to be a little less catastrophic for the country. And so, like, I don't want like the left, broadly speaking, to have to carry the weight of we're responsible for all the awfulness of 4 more years of Trump, right? Like that was I ran into this when I was trying to persuade people, like, I think that happened during this primary with Bernie Sanders. Is like some people, not necessarily super fairly, but some people blamed his extended fight with Clinton for Trump getting elected. And that created a ton of resistance to him. Like, it's important that Andrew Yang is being a good soldier right now, right? Like I ran, I had my views, but I think we all need to come together. That's the way you build credibility in the party going forward, is by people knowing that like you got your ideas of where we should go, but you're on the team.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it really is about like the idea of the greater good, not just the all good, but the greater good. You have to carefully balance being pragmatic with being progressive. So exactly as you brought up, the whole idea of as long as people know my ideas are there and that they have support, that's important. Now I'm gonna make sure that the world, because you've only got 2 feet right now, pragmatically, that can win the presidential general election. You got the left foot and you got the right foot.
Well,
If you
what bothers
Well, that kind of leads into my question, which mirrors Diston's. I'm in a solid blue state, and our popular vote is in no way connected to our electoral college. Our party bosses select the delegates and then they vote. So for me, would it be more advantageous to vote for a progressive third party to get them up to 5% to get that federal funding?
Ben?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of New Mexico, right?
Yes, New Mexico.
New Mexico election law. Like, do you have bound delegates? Do you know?
I believe that they.
Okay, because it is really rare for a delegate to vote against the person they are pledged to, right? Like, it does happen, but it's pretty rare, and it's even more rare for party, if it's a party boss selection process where like you go and you vote Biden and then the party boss picks somebody, they're picking a strong Biden supporter. So like you don't have control over the person who shows up and gets to, I don't know, do whatever the ceremony is. I don't know how the electoral college even works, but like or like when that vote happens, but I do think the likelihood that it would translate into a Biden vote in the end is pretty high.
Biden was less supportive of direct cash payments than Trump was. That's something I'm extremely disappointed in. I mean, like all of these people on the Democratic side, even Tim Ryan, Ro Khanna, all these people like direct cash, but we've yet to hear anything from him.
So I think, maybe this is a time to talk a little bit. Like, I don't know when was the Trump support for direct cash payments? Like, where did that come from? Because I'm not actually familiar with that.
Well, he didn't write his name on the check.
We got $1,200.
He did take the credit at one point. So
he took the credit and he told Mnuchin to get out there and say that we needed to pass the first stimulus of the $1,200 per adult because, oh my God, the COVID is causing people to stay home and we can't possibly have riots in the streets and blah, 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 blah. So it was more of a pragmatic approach from him trying to keep the peace than him actually tacitly wanting it. It's more of a, well, I don't want riots and people trying to chop my head off, so let's give them the fucking money.
And within a 24-hour time period of that, Nancy Pelosi received, her first draft of the CARES Act on her desk, and her staff had written it, and she returned it to her staff and said, hey, we can't have direct payments to people on means tested in here during that same 24-hour period when Donald Trump was giving people untested means payments.
I'm not, in some ways, not even here to defend Biden personally, and I'm definitely not here to defend everything Nancy Pelosi
Yeah,
does.
Pelosi. I'm just saying the Biden as a surrogate for the Democratic Party must be considered. If there's a way to talk to treat the Democratic Party as a whole, perhaps we should treat Joe Biden today as the Democratic Party and do what must be done to the Democratic Party through Joe Biden.
I think what's important is, like, I don't think you can treat the party as a whole in that way. That's a way, like, movements give you a way to not do that. Because when you're just one person, it's, like, you only have so much time, you only have so much energy. But when you're a whole group of people, you can look for levers of change, like lots and lots of levers of change. So you can, like, push on one congressman or one person and this lever, and that, you can make phone calls, you can give money to people in this race or that race, right? You can support primary candidates or candidates for Senate who are running on UBI. Like, you can do all that stuff. And so that, because you're doing lots of things, you don't have to have a monolithic view of the party. But one thing on the like support for direct cash payments, like, there is a history of Republican, or like conservative more than Republican, like, support for UBI sort of in principle, but it comes from a really interesting place. Like,
Alaska, right?
The Democratic version, that I get, to me, is like more money for more people. That's bullshit, right? And the conservative one is, if the government has to be doing something, and we don't want it to be doing anything, but if it has to be doing something, maybe it can just give people money.
That's not a bad case.
Yeah. Well, but
I mean, they're both.
The problem is that they're always going to circle back to, well, why does the government have enough money to give people?
Or maybe the problem is you have no faith in them.
In Republicans? No, but, like,
yeah, why should we? Yeah, why expect faith in mainstream Democrats but not give faith to mainstream Republicans? I don't see mainstream Democrats averting their faith either.
From, right, like, that UBI as a way of limited government support while still doing redistribution. Even if you like maybe some people are sincere in wanting to do the redistribution, some people aren't. When I see them vote for tax cuts that redistribute up and not down, then that kind of cuts the faith out for me. Mm-hmm. But it's still coming as a way to redirect the welfare state, right? Like, it's a way to take the spending we're already doing and turn it into something else. Whereas what I want for UBI is to help people more, right? Like, to, like, add on to what we do, like, expand the way in which we support, and, like, stop being so particular about, like, are you working? Do you have a job? Do you deserve to be supported? And, like, just help people who need help.
That's not what Joe Biden wants, though, is the thing.
I mean, lots
go on.
Lots and lots of people have things that fall in that, like, more money for more people, less bullshit stuff. Like, if you look at what happened with the unemployment insurance, which is tied to work, but Democrats, and, like, boring Democrats like Michael Bennet, pushed for $600 a month or a week, not tied to income, and expanding the definition of what counts as work so that it pulls in gig workers, that it pulls in people in a lot of different situations. Not
Sheridan?
What? I'm sorry?
Sheridan will probably have some sort of reply to this, because he is currently a small business owner who is being told not to collect unemployment.
Like, definitely not perfect, but also a lot of money for a lot of people.
Thankfully, New Mexico is a little bit more sensible, being a small state that has had to deal with a lot of small state problems. It knows that its small businesses are crucial, so it's expanded its I believe economic injury disaster loans thing, basically the PPP small business, so that pretty much any small business could get like $1,000 per employee.
That's good.
So thankfully I was able to get that, at least something.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, this is what the next at least 2 years are going to look like for all of us, no matter where we're, like, unless we're dyed-in-the-wool Biden people, is partial victories and things that aren't perfect. But the difference is, like, if there's a lot of us together, we can look at things and be like, and tell the difference between something that is just bad and something that, like, does some real good. We don't like everything, but it does some real good, so we take it, we move on.
I'd like to address your idea.
Sorry, on that note, I actually have to duck out, unfortunately.
Well, thanks for coming, Steve.
Sure, yeah.
I
I'll
know
let you guys
you're dealing
finish
with
up.
dogs and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
thank you for coming.
But yes,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't be opposed to coming back on at some point, but I'll let you all
I'd love to
continue
have
the
you on.
conversation.
I hope we made you comfortable. You feel all right with this whole thing? Because I know it's a tough thing to do.
The whiskey helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you
But
do
no,
whiskey
I was happy to be here, and I'm glad. I think the discussions we had were healthy ones, and that
Good.
there was not really there's no animosity here to the point where we're fighting battles that there's no good outcome for. I think we're all trying to get a good outcome. So
Well, yeah, we're all on the
I
same
think-
page. As
I
long as we
think,
just understand we're all just
like,
trying to
if-
find the best solutions. It really
if
shouldn't be
it-
super personal
I
between
like
us,
this
right?
because if we put more pressure for Yang's policies or wherever, then I think, like, we can get them through. It's just that, like, a goodwill kind of pressure. I mean, I don't know, but I think with a lot of, like, Bernie stuff, maybe the pressure was a little bit bad.
So
Will.
I think
know,
I
but yeah.
phrased it like this earlier, and I've actually had this discussion with another friend who he's very good at dealing with political animosity. He's leagues above what I would ever be able to deal with. But he said the best way to frame this for anybody who is tepid or tacitly supporting Biden to, at this point, all but unconvinced that Biden would be a terrible pick, that it's going to be much easier not only winning a fight with Biden from within the party, but infinitesimally easier to persuade Biden to bring in people who represent your views at the effective levels, the agency levels, and below. And of course, down ballot races are super important. But that's why Biden is still worth the vote for, even in light of all of these things to disincentivize or discourage people living in a super red state, the way that your state works not really going along with making you feel like your vote matters. But it's those little steps in the right direction also afford big opportunities to take larger steps in your direction as opposed to the alternative. And with that, I will leave.
All right. Well,
yeah.
we'll see you again, Steve. I
Thank
hope
you,
you do come
Steve.
back,
Yeah.
and I'll talk to you
Okay.
soon, man. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming on. Bye. All right. Well, before we truly run out of time, Ben, I just want to say this idea of a Big Ten and big coalition, in theory, doesn't seem to operate in the way you present it. How it seems to operate, this I'll be there for you, you'll be there for me, is one way, because the actual poor people don't have leverage over the middle class and rich people. So when they're there, when the poor people show up for these cultural and non-economic and non-poverty level debates and policy discussions, but the inversion is not true. There's just no support for the actual real economic progressives at all in the Big Tent coalition outside of they themselves. And it will only come if we show that they will not don't go along with what we are asked. If we say, hey, okay, you weren't there for us for 30 years, we're not there for you. How do you like it? And you will now register it, or we will leave. We'll go to another party, You need us in your coalition. You need to actually give us. It's time to pay us back what we paid you for many decades. So that is where we are in the Democratic Party, I believe.
Well, I mean, I agree with all of that up until the very last point. I think it's absolutely true that the Democratic Party hasn't shown up for people who are struggling the way it needs to. I think that's really hard to argue with. And I think that people aren't going to trust the Democratic Party at all until we start really delivering.
Yep.
Now it's hard to really deliver in our system, especially when you need 60 votes in a body that can be controlled by
if it's hard for you, maybe someone else should do the job. That's the thing, Let me talk to the Democratic Party like it's a person. If it's hard for you to work in this system and do your job, maybe someone else should do your job.
No. I mean, if you look at we have 2 houses of Congress that are elected at different times. We have a stupid filibuster rule. Like, we have a lot of things that make it really hard to do stuff. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do more. And in the meantime, like, you know, the last time there was Democratic control, even notionally, of both Congress and the presidency was 2010, which is a decade ago. And we got
and they still didn't do a whole lot, did they?
Yeah,
They
so
gave
let me
up a lot
address.
to the
Oh, we got
Republicans.
ACA and Medicare expanded.
If-
That's the
It-
last notable thing in the last decade.
So I
But-
think that
the
the crux
Democratic
of this,
Party.
I think the
If-
crux of this is something that Ariel often talks about, is the credentialism that exists in the party, and it also relates to what just happened to me an hour before I showed up to this, is that there's this sense that you can only run the purity candidate, like you were saying, that we're not trying to go for the perfect candidate. With Joe, he's not perfect, obviously. There's stuff that will cancel him, it seems like, if you allow it to. And that's the thing, is we have that culture in the Democratic Party. We're looking for the perfect, looks beautiful, but we're supposed to be representing people who don't look beautiful, who are poor, who are missing teeth, who don't have medical insurance, so they are disabled. We are looking at people who are not of the regular, sexual preference or gender sometimes. And there's also, we're trying to represent people who are not beautiful, and then we don't allow them to be the ones that go up to the top and speak for themselves. We keep putting a representative in the middle, saying like, okay, here's the one that looks good for the camera, right? Joe Biden looks great for the camera. I mean, honestly, he's got those blue eyes or something. I mean, I look at them, I'm like, wow, he must have been really something, even a little younger. But as an older person, men look great. I mean, you've got that mane of white hair and everything. It's great. So it's like, you keep sending people up there and they just don't feel representative of us. The rest of us who give them so much effort during these grassroots, and then to be disappointed time and time again. I asked these older Democrats, I said, how do you do it? You've been in this fight for like 20 years, and I don't see the younger people coming in. And I think that is something that we have to call them out for. It's like, you have not brought people in. We have to look at that. Why are not people joining you? You can't blame the Republicans for that. There has to be something you have to look at. So
I mean,
yeah,
it's such an inability to self-reflect on both sides, and it's grotesque.
I voted for third-party candidate for president since 2012 because I was not very pleased with what Obama did militarily. He did not pull out of Iraq like he planned, and I had lost some classmates to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And so that was one thing that I found unconscionable. He was not doing enough to, prevent the Keystone Pipeline getting through. He was not doing enough to, promote what is now known as the Green New Deal. ACA was okay, but it, gave a lot of caveats to the Republicans in order to get enough votes, because they had enough votes to pass it. But because you said, Ben, the filibuster rule, they were able to, push for a lot of these stupid things, which basically made it not what it was originally supposed to be. It was originally supposed to be universal health care. It was Hillary Clinton's 1994 plan, redone for 2010, but then they dumbed it down to the point where it was basically unable to do what it was supposed to do, even with what little money they gave it.
Yeah,
And
it was Romney care.
Because of that, I went and started voting for third-party candidates when available, and researching the Democratic candidates that were available to me as to whether or not they were actually better than or worse than the third-party candidate, which had more values and views astringent to what I was looking for. And that is where a lot of us younger people went. We either went to a third party or dropped out of the elections. We didn't vote. So, I mean, what can the Democratic Party do with Biden being the presumptive nominee to enlarge the tent and actually give the little people, the poor people, the vote?
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to organizing, but like, it's not necessarily something the Democratic Party does. It's something we do. So I'm, I work with a great group of people here in Brooklyn, supporting Warren, and we're like all still talking to each other, still engaged in politics, like changed our group name, and like a bunch of us are running for a thing called County Committee, which is there's like 1,000 people or 3,000 people on it, but like they're the like legislature of the Democratic Party in Brooklyn, right? So you have this little district that's like 3 blocks, and so they do boring stuff like who gets to be the nominees for judge positions, right? Which like, okay, it seems boring, but like those are the people who end up deciding like who gets evicted and who doesn't, right?
And they're also the people who get to, bump up a case to the next level of the Supreme Court and slowly figure out whether or not we got people in the Supreme Court who are decent or complete pieces of shit.
Yep. And like that's the Democratic Party in Brooklyn. If there's an open seat, they pick the person who's the nominee in the special election for the open seat, right? Which, given how democratic large parts of Brooklyn are, that person might be in office for 20 years. So, it is a lot of work to gain these little increments of power, and no one person can do it. But a group of people together really can. And over time, like if you make Brooklyn a little bit less of a party boss system and more of a like popular progressive place, and over time the people who become representatives in Brooklyn become the sort of people who would vote for a Green New Deal or real universal health care or a UBI, like over time that has an effect if everybody's doing it all around the country too. But it's a lot of work.
And right now we're on the precipice of basically not being a country anymore. Kind of.
Are we? Maybe we are. I just don't feel so invested. That sounds like maybe it's not going to be worse. I don't know.
I think, the country is in danger.
Fucked.
Yeah, the country is in danger.
I feel that even without Trump, if Trump were to die tomorrow of coronavirus or a heart attack or whatever, and Pence was running against Biden in the election, it doesn't matter.
It wouldn't make a bit of difference.
Because of the way that both the DNC and the RNC, as corporate entities acting as political powers, the way they elect and choose the people who are allowed to run through their gatekeeping of how much it costs, how many signatures you need, all the state crap. Because of all of those gatekeeping options, they're going to keep everybody below the income level of rich from running for office above a certain way.
This thing I'm running for, it's only this one national delegate thing which means I get to attend a convention for 3 days or something like that. It's less than a week long, and there's duties I might perform there, but that's it. And just to run for that, it costs typically $1,500. Just go stay at the hotel, and these are expenses you pay for yourself, or you have to like fundraise. So it's like in any other year I might have been just I can't afford that, so I'm just not even going to bother to try. But I felt like this is the one year I really have to, because what if it's just a virtual conference, and it would have been I would be sitting at home like now, the way I'm talking to you, and be attending the national convention, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even need to fundraise. Like, this is one of those very unusual times. But usually, like doing that, somebody suggested to me, why don't you run the committee chair for the Texas Senate District? Okay, well, the Senate District chairwoman, there's a chairwoman and a chairman. So they always have one of each sex. So the chairwoman is stepping down. I asked her, I said, well, do they pay you for this? And she says, so everything she does, she has to pay out of her own pockets. And so who can do this? Nobody can ascend to that position unless they're funded. So it's super important that we are able to not just get money out of politics, but fully the politics that we need to have done. The real grassroots stuff has to be funded. like not just wait for people who afford it to do the volunteering and do all the work.
Yeah. I mean, I ran for mayor in my hometown in 2012 because back when the Occupy Wall Street thing was happening in 2008 to 2010, I was involved in a lot of grassroots campaigning, trying to get people elected to different, state level representatives. And the amount of money that they had to raise in signatures they had to do in Minnesota, in rural Minnesota, just to get on the ballot for a state representative position was insane for me as someone who barely was able to make ends meet. But yet, as you may be able to know, I mean, I know things, I've seen things, I can articulate, but I don't have the money. I do not have the money to actually have the political platform that I could use to help others. So how do we as individuals promote these ideas with this big tent? How do we find ways to make it clear to the DNC, to Biden, to the congressionals, to all of that, that they need to make it easier for those of us who are of lower income but have ideas and have an ability to speak and articulate and actually maybe change, say, a red state into a blue state? Why are they not doing things to, help fund these people instead of, gatekeeping them with these fees? I mean, what the fuck?
So,
because remember, Occupy Wall Street was what, 10 years ago? How many of those people who started there are in Congress right now? AOC and probably Ilhan Omar, and that's about it.
Somehow I did not make it myself. I don't know.
Have you joined the local Democrats in your area, Shale, or the Republicans? I don't know. Do you attend any party
I'm a registered
things?
Democrat. I don't attend any Democrat events. No, I vote.
So
I'm
I
going
would.
to vote,
So
but
this
not
is
for
my
Joe Biden.
advice. Oh, okay. So my advice to people who have been really frustrated with the party and talking about and angry at the establishment, which we all are. I mean, I'm also one of them. But I think it helps when you humanize the party and you realize that it really is made up of all these people. And yes, they are older people. And yes, some of them are wealthier. And yes, quite a few of them are kind of disconnected with how people really live now. And with young people, they can be very judgmental. But to say that, but they get very upset when they're called the establishment because they are doing everything also for free. So many of them. Most of them are constantly having to try to scrounge up money in order to do this next thing that they need to do in order to just keep the party running. So it's really interesting.
Well, the
that's
fact
the
that they're
reason
not
why
paid to defend the system of which they are a beneficiary does not make them not the establishment.
But this is a pragmatic point that Faye's making, and it's a really good one. Is that like especially with the Democratic Party in red states, so often they're just the people who are running things are just the people willing to show up at boring meeting.
Yeah, like most of the people I've met, yeah.
Some of this stuff at the local level is an open door. Like, it is surprising when you start showing up to stuff, like how quickly you matter because you're one of the 5 people who showed up.
Well, I will give a little bit of an idea of what my county looks like right now.
Yeah.
There is no Democratic Party in my county. There's no Democratic anything. It is so far red that my wife is a teacher and was asking about who was best for me to vote for the school board. And they were asking, what her and my ideas were politically. And they basically said that, I'm best off in this quarantine situation staying home because I am not welcome in this town. I'm not welcome in this state. I'm not welcome in this county because I am a liberal. I am not a diehard right-wing Republican, religious, oil baron, or rancher. So I am not welcome. And that right there is the same attitude I got when I attended the Democrat meetings in my home county, because they were DINO, Democrat in name only.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that they were rural Minnesota, they were a lot of farmers, and they were afraid of offending anyone.
Yeah.
By even suggesting, oh my God, we make people register their guns. That's the worst thing in the world. So, I mean, coming from being basically an outsider trying to get in for the better part of 10 years, it's really rough.
Yeah.
And we need to make drastic changes to how we elect our representatives and get away from the party system in general, because that just keeps people out. It makes it so that it's a label. If I were to go, because I have gone to my relatives who are more right wing and talked about stuff like UBI and talked about stuff like, you know, increasing the capital gains taxes and other, you know, left wing policies to these right wing Republican voters. They agreed with me on everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute that I tie the word Democrat to it, they shut me out.
Yeah,
it's the problem with our political system right now. And that is where we need to get to after this election.
Yeah, getting rid of those labels, pretty important.
Yeah, we're gonna have to win power in this system in order to create the next system is the problem.
Unless this one
Or I
just
don't have a
falls
way
totally
around.
apart, then we'll just build it up from the dust, or we'll be dead, whatever.
In Montana, I guess there's nothing stopping you creating a, like, I don't know, like maybe there's some different party that is actually liberal, like that you start.
I know I got a little slip for Green Party, a slip for the Democratic Party, and a slip for the Republican primary, saying fill out one of these and only one, and that's what you get to do. So, and it's like Green Party has almost as many candidates at the state level as the Dems, but they have as little chance of winning because they're not Republican.
I guarantee you, though, that you're not the only person who's a liberal in your area. It's just everybody's.
No, it's just that everybody's too on board with the social stigma of we have to talk like this in order to, you know, whatever. Because, you know, if you were to come out as the L word liberal, that is a dirty word. And that's why it's so important that we get rid of these stupid words, because I have found so many of my friends that I know who voted for Trump didn't vote for Trump because he was a Republican. They voted for Trump to own the libs.
Yeah.
And they plan to vote for him to own the libs. That's it. Because they see a person who identifies as Democrat or liberal as an SJW. Transsexual,
I call that
bisexual, whatever. And that is like the most narrow-minded bullshit, but that's what we're up against. It's not Biden versus Trump. It's those ideas against each other. And that is the real problem we're going to have after this election. And I am still full on board with the COVID 2019 party of please out with the old, please, for the love of fuck, Trump and Pence. You have so many members of your detail that have COVID. Please get it and die.
Gosh, I hear you, man. When I talk to people who feel that way, let's try to figure out why. You know, why do you feel that way? You just got to ask, and like do the work of digging down to where the fear comes from of liberals or whatever. And then also you can sort of try to make the, I think, completely correct case that, hey, buddy, me and you are actually very similar. Economically, our interests are almost completely aligned. And cultural issues are being strategically used to divide us by rich people. What do you think of that?
Yes.
And they're not stupid. Republicans are not stupid. We are made to think they are, but they're intelligent human beings just like us, and they can be reasonable if approached with like seriousness and love and respect.
Yeah, I had a lot of conversations in North Carolina and Virginia in particular with like Republicans where, you know, I mean, you talk about various types of corruption, and they are not there for it. They don't like that Amazon pays no taxes, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
they hate Congress. They hate our political system. Not everybody, but a lot of people.
It helps if you also don't like Congress or our political system, which I mean we don't. So we got common ground.
Yeah, but it's like there's a level like cynicism is such a delicate thing, right? Like because you need some of it, some anger in the system.
It's got to
But
be directed correctly.
you can't have so much of it that taking action is pointless. So it's a really delicate dosage thing where you can overdose very easily on it, but you do need some righteous anger. But like I don't know. I mean, I had some success. I had some conversations that went pretty well. With Biden, it's a trickier one. I haven't worked my head around how you have that particular talk yet, but like, I don't know.
What is this talk we're trying to have?
Warrior, so I don't know.
Oh, I don't think there's a talk to. I mean, like, I cannot come up. I mean, I think you've made good cases, but ultimately, I'm not convinced to vote for Biden. So I couldn't come up with like a case to make for a conservative for Biden. I can come up with cases for things I believe would actually behoove them. I don't see how Biden would, so I can't myself either. I can't help with that either. But I do know how to talk to conservatives about basic income, poverty, and electoral politics just as well as liberals and all stripes of progressives.
Yeah, I just, the only thing for you, Shells, I just don't feel like this is like blackmail's not going to work this election very well. I don't think.
I'm not blackmailing anybody. I mean, what do you say?
No, like hold it.
I don't think the podcast was going to be about like convincing Shale to vote for Biden. I mean,
What's the blackmail going on?
Not have an argument with Shale because we've been doing it since we were how old? 3?
I don't know, and I mean, I think we've actually been politically much more aligned until maybe a year or two ago. We've been arguing over stuff, but
no,
I think
our politics have only recently
well, that's
diverged.
okay. This is the part where I think people would converge more if Shale were actually participating with the Democratic groups or with the Republican groups, and seeing how the party really operates. That may ameliorate the divide. I hear that one is getting is much more involved and one is not involved. And so that's what's going on with Yang Gang is like I see a lot of Yang Gang kind of stand outside and just criticize and say, well, those people over there. Well, I was like, have you ever gone to the same room and been in the same room with those people? And then pretty soon they become real humans. And that's what it is you see them as more human and then you like forgive them for a lot of the problems.
You talk about the financial vector being a barrier. Like I couldn't consistently afford like an Uber or taxi over to the meeting. It's like that is the degree of poverty in which I live. So I really can't.
Oh yeah,
I need the UBI before I can participate meaningfully in society.
Luckily, everything's online.
That's
now,
true.
So we're all on an even footing.
Well, and for my own selfish benefit, I hope this lasts forever. But it's not going to.
When I first wanted to go to a meeting in my little county area, which is actually very small because the meetings had probably 10 people in them, if that, I was told, well, you really can't bring your son, my 6-year-old, who's pretty well behaved, but they didn't know him. They were like, we meet in this little, we meet in an actual private home. Like once again, in our county, there's not enough Democrats to actually have like a real office, right? Or a real, like you can't even open an office without somebody wanting to trash your office or something. So, so they were like, well, we meet in this lady's home and it's just filled with, like knickknacks and things like that. We just don't want little kids running around. And so that would have prevented me from going. So again, it's like, but then after I kept saying I want to come, they were like, well, maybe we should, try to do something a little different now that we have somebody that actually wants to come. But it took me that extra step of saying, okay, let me push for that. And then it happened. And so it's, but very slowly, it's like, we have to show up though, I think. That's my main goal with people is to find out what the process is and not stand outside, try to get in and then check it out. And then it's harder to be angry about like real people. They're like your grandmas, like, and then when you see them, you're like, I just want to show up and help them. I just want to like teach them how to use this machine and teach them how to do something that they've never done before. And, so then I started volunteering in the senior center, but then COVID-19 happened. So that's kind of stopped. And so it's just like a lot of stuff like that. I think we need to humanize each other a little bit more. But I also have to kind of, so that's why I'm like going in usual teachers thing. It's like an occupational hazard. I'm like a private tutor by trade. So thank you for having me on today, and thank you for talking to me and letting me represent the women's point of view and stuff. All right.
Yeah, I'm so glad you
Bye.
were on. I was hoping we'd have a few women, but thank you. At
Yes,
least
we
you
were very
here,
glad to
thank
have you. We're very glad to have you around, Faye. You're great.
Thank
Should
you.
we,
All right. I'll
should we
see
end
you
the
later.
conversation here? See you, Faye.
Oh, that
I
might
need
be,
to go
yeah.
too.
Yeah, let me all just get going
Alright,
here. Faye, do you want
nice
to say
to-
goodbye first? Say your Twitter so you can get going.
Oh, okay, yeah. So my Twitter is at Palestine Math, and Palestine is the small town in East Texas where I live. So Palestine. Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for having me. Really enjoyed it. Good talk.
Ben, do you want to? Yeah,
You-
I guess.
Do you
You
want to
don't have
share
like a
your
Twitter or
Twitter or
anything, do you,
anything?
Ben? I don't think
No,
he
I
does.
don't have anything to really plug.
He's a very offline man. Yeah.
Working on that, but not.
You're a hands-on
Hey man, you do you. Whatever
organizer.
worked for you. It's not for
Yeah.
everybody.
I feel-
You seem to be doing okay.
Get you to have me back to talk about the gig guarantee sometime now.
Yeah, you're welcome back anytime. We do 4 shows a week. We do a Sunday morning. We do a Sunday afternoon 4 to 6, Saturday morning 10 to noon, a Saturday afternoon 3 to 5, and a Friday morning 10 to noon. So anytime to jump in if you feel like it.
That's great.
All times are Eastern because
All times Eastern, just
Shell
like
is
us.
and Eastern.
Yeah, we're both in New York. Thank you.
Texan.
All right.
Texan. Central
All right,
time around here.
So just Don, do you want to give your Twitter?
I have more than just the Twitter, but
Yeah, sure.
yeah, I've been Dizdon. Dizdon Plays, DISDONNPLAYS on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. I've got a LGBT plus charity organization and marathon coming up in 2 weeks. Retro Rainbow. That's retro__rainbow on Twitch and Twitter. And that will be benefiting the Trevor Project in 2 weeks, the 22nd to the 24th. So yay me, I'm busy as fuck.
Nice. Yes, you are. Congratulations. Thank you for your service, Don. Ariel, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here. I just want to say, let's try to not have a government of by and for the oligarchs and of
That's
by
what we're
and
going
for the
for.
people.
Exactly.
So yeah, so
Amen.
I'm Ariels_Armand on Twitter. That's ARIELS_ARMADA, and you can follow me on YouTube as Revolutionary Thing.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you for being here. Jeremy.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, my name is Jeremy. You can follow me on Twitter at JeremySammons1. That is JeremySammons and the number 1.
Thank you. And I am at SHAELRILEY on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Did I say watching? Thank you for watching. Watching again very soon. Stay safe out there. Be good to each other. And yeah, keep it here. Goodbye.